Please don't make me leave yet, the old woman whispered, her voice trembling as the waitress set down a fresh cup of tea. The words stopped Ava Collins mid-step. She turned slowly, eyes softening. The diner was half empty that morning, the kind of gray, cold day that made even the neon sign outside flicker like it wanted to give up. Stay as long as you need, ma'am, Ava said gently. Across from her sat Margaret Lane, wrapped in a long black coat that had seen better years. The silver feather pin near her collar caught the dim light, trembling as her hand shook while lifting the cup. Ava noticed the tear tracks before Margaret could hide them. She'd been crying, again. It wasn't unusual for her to come in early. 4 weeks now, she'd sat in that same corner booth, the one near the drafty window that most customers avoided. She always ordered the same thing, tea and dry toast, and paid with coins that clinked softly on the table like echoes of a past she no longer wanted to talk about. Ava had stopped asking questions after the first few mornings. Sometimes silence said more than stories ever could. But today felt different. You didn't sleep last night, did you? Ava asked quietly. Margaret gave a weak smile. Not really. Hard to rest when you don't know where you'll be tomorrow. The words hit Ava harder than she expected. She'd heard hardship before. Drunks, loners, tired travelers. But this was different. This woman had no one. Ava slid into the booth across from her, ignoring the voice in her head, reminding her that her manager would yell if he saw her sitting. Where are you staying now? Margaret hesitated, staring down at the swirling steam in her cup. Nowhere. They raised the rent again. I packed what I could fit in a single suitcase and left. The rest, I left behind. Ava's throat tightened. She looked around. The smell of coffee, the hum of the old jukebox, the hiss of the grill, all of it suddenly felt too warm, too unfair. I can't let you sleep out there, Ava said before she could stop herself. There's a spare couch in my apartment. It's not much, but it's warm. Margaret's eyes widened. Oh, sweetheart, no? You've already done too much. I can't ask that of you. You didn't, Ava said simply. I offered. There was silence between them then, gentle, heavy, and sacred. Ava didn't have much. Her shoes had holes, her rent was late, and her dreams were smaller than they used to be. But kindness didn't need money. It just needed a heart that still worked. Later that night, after her shift ended and the wind howled outside like it was warning them both, Ava found Margaret waiting near the door with her small, worn suitcase. They walked together through the empty streets, sharing stories that neither had told anyone in years. Margaret spoke of the ocean, of a husband she lost too soon, and a daughter who'd stopped calling. Ava shared how she'd grown up bouncing between foster homes, learning to smile because it hurt less than crying. By the time they reached Ava's apartment, the city lights had dimmed. Ava turned the key and let her in. The warmth hit them both like a promise. Thank you, Margaret whispered, tears returning, but softer this time. You didn't have to. Ava smiled faintly. Maybe not. But someone once told me kindness doesn't need a reason. That night, as the old woman finally slept, Ava sat by the window with a blanket over her shoulders, watching the city breathe under the winter sky. She didn't have much to give the world, but for once, it felt like she'd given enough. That evening, after her shift ended, Ava Collins didn't walk Margaret Lane to the bus station. She walked her home, to her own tiny apartment on the second floor of an aging brick building. She gave Margaret her bed, tucked an extra blanket over her shoulders, and took the couch without a second thought. For the next week, Ava shared everything she had, her food, her time, her fragile sense of hope. She washed Margaret's clothes by hand in the sink, made tea for her in chipped mugs, and helped her call local programs that might offer help. Margaret tried to protest, but the gratitude in her trembling hands said everything words couldn't. More than once, tears gathered in her eyes. Why are you doing this? She asked one night, as Ava folded a pile of freshly dried laundry. Ava smiled faintly. Because no one did it for me. And I promised myself if I ever had the chance, I'd be the person I needed back then. For the first time in a long while, Margaret looked like she wanted to believe in something again. But a week later, everything changed. Margaret didn't come to the diner. Ava tried to convince herself maybe she was just tired or visiting a shelter. But when she didn't show up the next day or the next, an unease began twisting inside her. After work, Ava rushed home, heart pounding, only to find Margaret's borrowed room empty. The bed was neatly made. The extra blanket was folded at the foot, and there, on the pillow, was a note written in delicate cursive. Thank you for giving me back hope. Margaret. No address. No explanation. Just that one line. Ava sank onto the bed and stared at the note until her vision blurred. She didn't understand why it hurt so much. Maybe because she'd gotten used to hearing Margaret's soft voice in the morning, or the way she'd hum quietly while sipping tea. Now the apartment felt hollow, like something sacred had vanished from it. She called hospitals. She called shelters. No one had seen a woman by that name. Weeks passed, then a month, and then one gray Tuesday morning, the kind that felt too still to be ordinary. Everything changed again. The bell above the diner door jingled, and suddenly the hum of conversation fell silent. Outside, a line of sleek black SUVs had pulled up to the curb. 4 men in dark suits stepped out, their movements crisp, deliberate, bodyguards. 2 men in tailored coats followed, holding briefcases. Their polished shoes looked wildly out of place on the diner's scuffed tile floor. Who are they? Someone whispered behind the counter. Looks like trouble, the cook muttered. Then one of the lawyers stepped forward, scanning the room. His gaze settled on Ava. Excuse me, he said, his voice formal but calm. Is there a Miss Ava Collins here? Every head in the diner turned. Ava froze, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. That's me, she said. Miss Collins, the lawyer continued. We've been asked to bring you with us. Her pulse quickened. Bring me? Why? What happened? You'll understand soon, he replied. Please come with us. Something deep inside her whispered that she should be afraid. But there was another feeling, too, a strange, almost magnetic pull that made her follow them. Within minutes, she was sitting inside one of the SUVs, watching the city blur past as they drove into a part of town she'd never seen except on television. Gated estates, marble fountains, lawns trimmed like green silk. When the car stopped, Ava stepped out in disbelief. Before her stood a sprawling mansion surrounded by tall evergreens dusted with snow. A guard opened the door with quiet formality, as though she were expected. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and old books. A piano played somewhere distant, its melody soft and haunting. The lawyers led her through a hall of portraits until they reached a sunlit room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a frozen garden. And there, seated in a velvet armchair by the fire, was Margaret Lane. But not the frail woman Ava had known. Her hair was beautifully styled, her posture regal, her lavender dress glowing softly in the firelight. When she turned, her eyes were bright and full of warmth. Hello, dear, she said, smiling. Ava's breath caught. Margaret. Yes, she said softly. It's me. Ava took a step forward, then another, emotions flooding through her all at once. Relief, confusion, disbelief. I thought something had happened to you. I called hospitals. Margaret reached out a hand. I know, sweetheart, and I'm sorry for worrying you, but I needed time to put things back in order. Then, with quiet grace, Margaret told her everything. She wasn't a destitute widow at all. She was Margaret Lane, the reclusive owner of Lane Holdings, one of the country's largest private investment firms. 2 years earlier, she'd lost her husband and only son in a plane crash. The grief consumed her. She vanished from her company, from her wealth, from the world, desperate to know if kindness still existed beyond the reach of money. I wanted to see, she said, her voice trembling slightly, if someone would still care when they had nothing to gain. Tears blurred Ava's vision. And then, Margaret continued, I met you, a woman with nothing to spare, yet you gave me everything that mattered. Warmth, dignity, hope. She rose and took Ava's hands in hers, the same way Ava had once done for her. I don't need a maid, she said softly, or a nurse. What I need is a heart I can trust. I want you by my side, Ava, not as an employee, as family. If you accept, everything I have will one day be yours. Not because of blood, but because of love. You reminded me why life is still worth living. Ava stood motionless, tears spilling down her cheeks. All her life, she had fought to survive alone, believing the world had forgotten her. But in that moment, she realized it hadn't. Sometimes, one act of kindness was all it took to turn a stranger into family, to turn loneliness into love, and to remind the world that compassion still mattered. And as they embraced, 2 hearts that had once been broken began to heal together, proof that no one is ever truly forgotten.